Hello, dear friends. This article is more of a personal confession than an ascetic essay. My generation was called the children of overwhelm. Who wasn't ever felt overwhelmed by the weight of their work? This world is very tiring even for those who invented it. My job now is to defend the old ethical and moral values in a world that has become empty and without values. I do not intend to make an apology for laziness, but to try to alleviate the burden we all carry by understanding the situation in which we find ourselves, which I call the burden of existence. Opinion piece. The tough sense of duty. It can become a very heavy burden. It derives from Kant's categorical imperative. It also derives from Calvinist Protestant ethics. The soul is burdened by the weight of its obligation. Every human being should cultivate his own talents. To work without pleasure can destroy a person. Sense of duty is deeply rooted in our culture. Stoicism is fortitude or mastery over sensitivity. Young ninis means no work, no study, no work. Have no sense of duty, and that's a bad thing. For Schopenhauer, life is overcome with will of power. He opines that servitude to the will is the root of suffering. Many have sought redemption through ascetic negation. Schopenhauer felt the pain of the world and the misery of existence. He saw the human will as our only window to reality. The human being becomes a machine when he tolerates boredom. Schopenhauer is not only a philosopher, it's also my personal guru. Not everyone can practice the sweet idleness of dolce far niente. Two people planning a coup d'etat in Belarus arrested in Moscow. The Spanish government faces criminal liability for the limitation of rights. Let's start. It's good to have a sense of duty and to do one's job, but sometimes this sense of duty follows all our lives and can become a heavy burden, a categorical imperative that makes our lives bitter. I do not use an alarm clock because there is always someone invisible who wakes me up in a bad way, as if I were a slacker to do my work, although once an invisible hand touched my shoulder to wake me up. Another time I had a bell that didn't exist, or even another time I had in the middle of the night a military bugle playing reveille. Sometimes the soul is overwhelmed by the weight of obligation and reminds me of the master's phrase, "Father, take this cup away from me, but not my will, but thine be done." It also reminds me of the Upanishads of ancient India that say that the universe is sustained at the cost of personal sacrifice. And it only occurs to me to comment that this universe must be very heavy to sustain, at least in the third dimension, because it gets lighter as you ascend, but I look back with nostalgia to my childhood when I had hardly any obligations. Many young ninis who neither study nor work have no sense of duty And that is not a good either, because they cannot make a living without a sense of responsibility. From childhood, we carry the sense of duty and the law when we are taught our duties and to respect the property of others. But many misunderstandings have distorted the concept that each person has of the moral sense of the law. As Bertrand Russell said, the sense of duty is useful at work, but offensive in personal relationships, because people want to be loved. An imperative is an inexcusable duty or demand. Duty is to be obligated to something by divine, natural or positive law. A duty is a commitment or expectation to perform some action in general, or if certain circumstances arise, a duty may arise from a system of ethics or morality, especially in a culture of honor. Many duties are created by law, sometimes including a codified punishment or liability for non-compliance. Fulfillment of your duty may require some sacrifice of self-interest. Stoicism. To help us carry this burden, we turn to Stoicism, which is fortitude or mastery over one's own sensibility, and is derived from a philosophical school founded by Zeno that met in a portico in Athens. Stoicism is a Hellenistic school of philosophy founded by Zeno of Citium in Athens in the early 3rd century before Christ. It is a philosophy of personal ethics informed by his system of logic and his views on the natural world. According to their teachings, as social beings, the path to happiness or bliss is found in accepting the moment as it presents itself, by not allowing oneself to be dominated by the desire for pleasure or fear of pain, by using the mind to understand the world and do its part in nature's plan, and by working together and treating others fairly and justly. The Stoics are especially known for teaching that virtue is the only good for human beings, and that those external things, such as health, wealth, and pleasure, are not good or bad in themselves, but have value as material for virtue to act upon. Along with Aristotelian ethics, the Stoic tradition constitutes one of the main foundational approaches to virtue ethics. The Stoics also held that certain destructive emotions were the result of mistakes of judgment, and believed that people should aim to maintain at will a will that is accord with nature. Because of this, the Stoics thought that the best indication of an individual's philosophy was not what a person said, but how a person behaved. This is what is called leading by example. To live a good life, one had to understand the rules of the natural order, since they thought everything was rooted in nature. Many Stoics, such as Seneca and Epictetus, stressed that because virtue is sufficient for happiness, a wise person would be emotionally resilient to misfortune. This belief is similar to the meaning of the phrase Stoic calm, although only a wise man can be considered truly free, and all moral corruptions are equally vicious. Categorical imperative. The categorical imperative is the central philosophical concept in Immanuel Kant's deontological moral philosophy. It is defined as a way of evaluating motivations for action. According to Kant, sentient beings occupy a special place in creation, and morality can be summed up in an imperative or ultimate commandment of reason, from which all duties and obligations derive. He defines an imperative as any proposition that declares a certain action or inaction to be necessary. In 1785 appeared The Foundations of the Metaphysics of Morals. In this book, Kant achieves a new transcendental foundation of ethics, trying to find out what human conduct is and what is the principle of its evaluation. Kant does not intend to elaborate a new morality, but to discover the principle according to which any moral fact of life can be explained. In his terminology, he calls this principle the categorical imperative. Kant also applies the categorical imperative in the Foundations of the Metaphysics of Morals on the subject of not cultivating one's own talents. He proposes a human being that if he cultivated his talents, he could bring many goods, but he has everything he wants and would rather enjoy the pleasures of life. The human being wonders how the universality of such a thing works. While Kant agrees that a society could subsist if everyone did nothing, he points out that human beings would have no pleasures to enjoy, because if everyone let their talents go to waste, there would be no one to create the luxuries that created this theoretical situation in the world. Not only that, but cultivating one's talents is a duty to oneself. Therefore, it's not intended to universalize laziness, and the rational being has an imperfect duty to cultivate his talents. Calvinism. Sometimes I envy those hippies dressed in colorful clothes with horchata blood who sleep everything. Their soul passes through their body and they only tell you, peace and love, brother. But I have not managed to reach that beatitude, perhaps because I do not smoke nor even tobacco. Someone told me that I have developed a Calvinist sense of work to survive, or that I had a mother who was too severe. Whatever it is, the fact is that I carry a slave driver inside my mind that sometimes even whips me to wake up and make me work like a slave, although I like my work. Sometimes I try to practice the Italian dolce far niente, but I don't always succeed. Dolce far niente, Italian for sweet idleness, it's a poem of the Finnish poet Aaro Heijakovski. In the book The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, Max Weber wrote that capitalism in Northern Europe, evolved when the Calvinist Protestant ethic influenced large numbers of people to engage in work in the secular world, developing their own businesses and engaging in trade and the accumulation of wealth for investment. In other words, the Protestant work ethic was a major force behind the unplanned and uncoordinated emergence of modern capitalism. The responsibilities. The tradition of duty is deeply rooted among Asian and American cultures, and contributes to much of the strong sense of duty that exists in Western cultures. At many stages of its evolution, the soul assumes leadership responsibilities and cycles of influence both large and small. Unfortunately, the task of leadership is often assumed for the wrong reasons, and the soul is either burdened by the weight of obligation or exalted by self-importance. True spiritual leadership requires the radiant quality of charisma or contagious enthusiasm. When the soul is ignited from within by positive identification with its inner ideals, its altruism can nurture and inspire others. Such leadership has nothing to do with coercive will that manipulates others, or with the execution of one's responsibilities as an obligation. On the contrary, it is an inner joy that energizes others. Nietzsche states that the task of all higher education is to turn men into machines. The way to turn men into machines is to teach them to tolerate boredom. This is achieved, says Nietzsche, through the concept of duty. Friedrich Nietzsche is among the fiercest critics of the concept of duty. In quotes, "What destroys a man more quickly," he asks, "than to work, think, and feel without inner need, without any deep personal desire, without pleasure, as a mere automaton of duty?" Close quote. According to Nietzsche, a duty is a commitment or expectation to perform some action in general, or if certain circumstances arise. A duty may arise from a system of ethics or morality, especially in a culture of honor. Many duties are created by law, sometimes including a codified punishment or liability for non-compliance. Fulfilling one's duty may require some sacrifice or self-interest. Schopenhauer's writings on the basis of morality had a profound effect on Nietzsche and led him to a series of reversals to show that morality is not based on compassion or sympathy, but on life overcoming itself through the will to power. Schopenhauer is not only a great philosopher, he is also my personal teacher. Schopenhauer. The world as will and representation is, without any doubt, the masterpiece of the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. It seeks to show the enigma of the world and to reach the meaning of existence. In it, the German thinker developed a summarized and whole philosophical corpus and an experiential ethics based on the main idea that being is will, and its phenomenological expression is representation. Schopenhauer saw the pain of the world and the misery of existence, the same like Buddhists, and left a deep imprint on artistic, literary, and musical creation, as well as on moral reflection. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Schopenhauer holds that the world that human beings experience around them exists only as a representation dependent on a cognitive subject, not as it appears in the mind of the subject. Knowledge of objects is thus knowledge of mere phenomena rather than of things in themselves. Schopenhauer identifies the thing in itself, the inner essence of everything, as will. A blind and conscious, aimless effort, devoid of knowledge, outside of space and time, and free of all multiplicity. Schopenhauer saw the human will as a only window into the reality behind the world and representation. It is to say, the external world as we can experience it through our mental faculties. He thought that the will is the inner essence of the whole world and exists independently of the forms of the principle of sufficient reason that govern the world as a representation. And he says all this 2 centuries before the movie Matrix. The world as representation is thus the objectification of the will. Aesthetic experiences briefly liberate persons from his endless servitude to the will, which is the root of suffering. The true redemption of life, Schopenhauer asserts, can only result from the total ascetic negation of the will to life. Schopenhauer points out fundamental agreements between his philosophy, Platonism, and the philosophy of the ancient Indian Vedas, that I loved a lot. Short news. 2 Belarusian coup plotters arrested in Moscow. Russian security agents arrested 2 Belarusians in Moscow who were planning a coup in Belarus on May 9th, the public relations centers of the Russian Federal Security Service said. Russia closes Ukraine's military access to the Black Sea. It was announced Thursday that Russia will close the Kerch Strait to all foreign warships for 6 months amid rising tensions in Ukraine, after the US threatened to send additional warships to the area. The Kerch Strait is the vital and narrow waterway connecting the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, and importantly connecting southern Russia to annexed Crimea. UK sent ships to Black Sea in support of Ukraine. The British Royal Navy is to send a number of warships to the Black Sea to show solidarity with Ukraine and NATO allies in the region. The move seeks to curb an alleged threat from Russia. Jerome Powell admits the federal budget is unsustainable but assumes he can fix it later. The US federal budget is on an unsustainable path, which simply means that the debt is growing significantly faster than the economy, and that, by definition, is unsustainable over time. It's different to say that the current level of debt is unsustainable, which it isn't. The current level of debt is very sustainable, and there is no question about our ability to repay and issue that debt for the foreseeable future, said Jerome Powell. The CIA used to infiltrate the media. Now it's the media. In the old days, when things were more innocent and simple, the agency had to covertly infiltrate the media to control information. Today, there is no meaningful separation between the media and the agency. Doña Hilaria convicted. According to Real News, a military court on Thursday convicted Doña Hilaria on charges of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, accessory to murder, trafficking of minors, treason and sedition. 2 men and 1 woman on the panel of officers delivered a unanimous verdict shortly after Vice Admiral John G. Hanning, who prosecuted the military case, exhibited his last prosecution witness, her former strategist and lover, Huma Abedin. There is no confirmation of the news, but I believe it to be true. May be true. Let us say. Stop the saber rattling and start this de-escalation before Russia-Ukraine conflict become a nuclear holocaust. Hawaii governor tells Biden, unless the world wants to see loved ones burned alive in a nuclear holocaust, politicians should do away with the macho act and start de-escalating. That's according to former U.S. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, governor of Hawaii, an Army veteran. Here is her quote. Are we prepared to watch our loved ones burned alive in the nuclear holocaust in war with Russia over Ukraine? If not, eliminate the macho saber rattling and de-escalate before it's too late. Close quotes. The Spanish government faces criminal liability for limiting rights. The Constitution reserves the suspension of rights to states of exception and siege. Jurists consider that the executive is overstepping its bounds. The members of the executive may incur criminal liabilities for the limitation of rights during the state of alarm. The royal decree that agreed this state of emergency with the first measures of the confinement and the subsequent ones that extended it is affecting rights that could always have been suspended with the declaration of the states of exception and siege. Hence, constitutionalists warn that the government's decision may be contrary to the Constitution or Magna Carta. Chinese authorities seize 7,221 human penises on cargo ship from Nigeria. A total of these limbs of African origin have been seized by Chinese customs officials in what is now being labeled as the world's largest seizure of human organs in history. The organs that were hidden in a refrigerated cargo container were seized when the ship was lodged at the port of Shanghai after receiving information from an anonymous tipster who alerted Chinese authorities. The organs were packed in 36 boxes, labeled bananas inside the refrigerated container on a ship transiting from Lagos, Nigeria, and the ship's crew consisted of 4 Nigerians, 2 Malians, 2 Cameroonians who are now in custody. Drought-resistant noble cactus could become a sustainable food and fuel source, new research shows. Cactus pears, called prickly pears, could become a sustainable source of food and fuel in places in need of these 2 resources. Those are the findings of a recent study by researchers at the University of Nevada, Reno. The only problem with prickly pears is that they cause constipation, and you can prick your fingers if you don't know how to peel them properly. A tourist recovers his iPhone that he lost a year ago in a lake, and it works perfectly. A tourist identified as Chenji managed to recover his iPhone 11 Pro Max a year after dropping in the Sun and Moon Lake in Nantou County, Taiwan, following severe drafts on the island. As Chen recounts on his Facebook account, while visiting the lake on March 15th, 2020, he placed his iPhone in a waterproof case hanging from his neck while paddle surfing. However, he misplaced his cell phone on one of the occasions. He lost his balance and ended up in the water. New Zealand is considering a ban on cigarette sales to people born after 2004 to create a smoke-free nation. The plan also includes a significant reduction in the level of nicotine allowed in tobacco and restrictions on where cigarettes can be sold. New Zealand is considering a series of anti-smoking measures that include banning the sale of cigarettes to people born after 2004 as part of a plan to achieve a smoke-free nation by 2025. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friend, and happy Sunday.